Good Lord, the sweet aroma of burning rubber. Oh. And it's hotter than Mount Vesuvius. If I get too close to that, it's going to take the flesh off my face. Now, if you've experienced the smell, you'll never forget it. You'll never mistake it. It will stay with you forever. That sweet aroma of burning rubber tells me there's a problem with the braking system. Better go and tell her it's off the road. Won't that make me popular? First, let's actually check we've got some brake fluid. This is your master cylinder for the brake fluid. And we don't appear to have lost any brake fluid. That looks good. That's a positive first start. Onwards. Do we have a parking brake error? We do not have a flashing P, which is also a good sign. Let's just put in the gap diagnostics just to make sure there's not been an electronic parking brake fault that appeared and has since gone. Gap diagnostics, couldn't be without it. Let's get down there. Yes, quiet for a moment. So with our gap diagnostics tool in, sure that's in, and we're connected. Let's have a look, see if we've got any faults. I'm particularly interested to see if we've got any electronic parking brake faults that were triggered and have subsequently vanished. And we've only got one fault. God, that must be some kind of record for a Range Rover. TMC traffic message, which is completely irrelevant. So that's also good. We've also got no warning that the brake pads have worn thin, as indicated by the brake wear sensor, which incidentally is on that side. So that's also a good sign. So let's just have a listen to see if we can hear the brake activating. That's the electronic park brake activating. Yep. So that doesn't sound like it's bound and stuck. Doesn't mean there's not an issue with it, but that's also promising. So let's get out and have a look in the rain at what we'll be looking at. Boy, we're having some crazy weather. Okay, this has cooled down enough for me to get close to it. So having a look at the disc, has got some score marks on it and a lip. It doesn't look horrendous, but we're going to replace that. The brake pads, which are difficult to see when the wheel's on, look like they've got some meat. So I suspect that we've got a caliper pin seizing or pin seizing. So the next thing is we need to get this wheel off, which is going to be fun in itself, because I'd forgotten that it's got this stupid locking wheel nuts on. So once we've got that off, we won't be putting it back on, we'll be putting a standard wheel nut back on. couple of these look like they're swollen, which is no great surprise. So we'll replace those as well. So the next thing is, let's have this wheel off, get stuck in there and have a look what we've got. So then, after our preliminary investigation, what can we conclude? Well, the results so far are inconclusive. We don't appear to be losing any brake fluid, which is always a good thing, but that doesn't mean to say that when we get down and start having a look, there's not been a little bit of weeping, because that would certainly cause the smell that we can detect. But I don't think it's a brake fluid issue. The electronic parking brake hasn't registered any errors on our gap diagnostics, and we can hear it activating and deactivating, and the little P on the dashboard isn't flashing, which would be a sign that there's been a failure on the electronic parking brake. So I don't think it's the electronic parking brake, but again, that doesn't mean to say once we start getting down and having a look, it's not going to be covered in rust, gunk and all kinds of debris and has been seized, or the electronic parking brake shoes might actually be no good. But what I think we're looking at is a caliper issue, and specifically the caliper slider pins, which have either sticking or they've seized, either one or both. I'm hoping it's not the caliper piston, and although we could rebuild the caliper piston, I'll probably, if it is that, just put a new caliper on. But I think it's the caliper slider pins. For all of that, we won't know 100% what issue we've got until we take the wheel off. So that's what we're going to do. And as we've got the wheel off, we're going to replace the discs and the pads. The disc is not horrendous, but it is scored and it has got a lip. And while we're under there, although it's probably got a little bit of life left in it, we'll replace it. Both sides, of course, because you don't just do discs and pads on one side, because that would be silly and frowned upon and dangerous. So I think the biggest problem I'm going to have looking at this side is the wheel nuts, which are swollen. So it might be fun getting the wheel off, so there may be some cursing and some swearing and the use of some big breaker bars. Particularly the locking wheel nut looks in a terrible state, and I think that'll put up a big fight. And once we've got that off, its days are done. It's dead. It's never going back on again, and we'll replace it with a normal locking wheel nut. So next is, let's get on the old interweb thingy and order ourselves some parts, some discs, some pads, some caliper slider pins, some wheel nuts. And when that all arrives, we'll jack the car up, take the wheel off and investigate further. Now, if you'd like to see what the issue is and how I'm going to sort it, stick around. And if you're bored already and want to go and watch somebody building a supercar in 10 minutes, toodle pip. Now, before we get to jacking the car up, let's have our little safety talk. Now, in the boot here, under here, you will probably find you've got a Land Rover provided scissor jack. And you may be thinking to yourself, well, if Land Rover have gone to the trouble of putting a scissor jack in my boot, it must be safe to jack the car up. No. Even the manual from Land Rover says only to be used in an emergency. I'd go one step further and say only use it in a life and death situation, and even then think twice. In Land Rover circles, scissor jacks are known as the Widowmaker, and for very good reason. I have personally seen 2 of them fail, and believe me, your life will flash before your eyes when your scissor jack fails and almost 2.8 tons of Range Rover come sliding towards the ground. And while you may not be working under it at the time, because if you are, you're in big trouble, but if you're not working under it, then the damage that this car will cause and the expense involved as it crashes into the concrete below, or whatever surface is there, will leave you feeling pretty miserable for a while. So my strong advice is leave the scissor jack exactly where Land Rover left it. Do not use it. Now I'm sure someone will be coming along to say, I've been using a scissor jack for the last 20 years and never had a problem. And to those people I say, good for you. But you shouldn't be teaching people that want to know how to jack their car up to use a scissor jack. Just don't do it. Wheel chocks. This is what we're using. Sealy WCO1s. Huge chunks of rubber, weighing about 1.8 kilograms each, and used on inclines up to 12 degrees. And we ourselves have a small incline. Substantial wheel chocks. We want to be sure this beast is not going to move once we chock it. Remove the cap from the brake fluid master cylinder. We're going to need that off in readiness for compressing the piston on the caliper. Deactivate the electronic parking brake, and as we're going to want to rotate the hub and we're only lifting one wheel at a time, put it in neutral. Disconnect the ground, negative. Locking wheel nuts. Oh, pleasant surprise. All cracked off. God, I'm out of breath. I must be getting old. And now it's time to jack it up. I'm happy with that. It's a bit rusty. Definitely the right thing to replace these discs. Let's have a look what's going on with the caliper, shall we? The brakes have got plenty of meat on them, so it's not the pads. So let's have a look at the calipers. Let's get them off and have a look. And this is why we took the top off the brake fluid master cylinder. So we're sneaking a screwdriver in and trying to compress the piston. Slow, firm pressure. It's quite stiff, that piston. But we're getting there. Slowly and surely. There we go, we're moving. There we go. Maybe a touch more. That's it. Okay. Well, the caliper pins are moving, but I should say by the fact that they're not springing back nicely, the grease and the pins are not happy. So let's proceed to take the caliper off. Now on the back we've got 13mm bolts, I believe. Let's just double check. Yep. Top and bottom. And we've got a 15mm bolt the other side, and we're going to need a slim spanner, slim, thin, whichever you prefer, 15mm to get there to stop the bolt spinning. So let's whip that out now. 1, 2. See if we can get this off. Using the thin spanner to stop that spinning. That's the top one and the bottom one. Because we've compressed the piston, which looks nasty, and it's also full of stuff, we're going to need to clean that up. That's the brake wear sensor. So let's hang this up somewhere sensible. There's loads of meat left on the pads. But they look pretty good. So let's take this carrier off next, because we're definitely going to be replacing these. Oh, they sound a bit grindy. Let's clean them up a bit. So we can get a socket on them. Make sure we clean it all off before we do any braking, of course. It's not a great thing to have in your braking system. So we're going to need the help of a breaker bar on these. There we go, that one's coming. Slowly. This one, oh, is putting up a fight as well. But with now we're off. So we've cleaned up the carrier best we can. It's looking better. And now we'll turn our attention to the slider pins. That one's not actually too bad, but that one is very grindy. So take out the boot pin, clean out the bore, put new boot and pin, grease them up, reassemble it and put it back on. New pins. Bit of silicone grease, not too much. Making sure there's none on the tip. A little bit more. Nice rotate, get that grease in there nice and evenly. And repeat. Well, when it stops raining, we'll go and reinstall that. And if the pesky little disc retaining Allen bolt puts up a fight, which it may do, get yourself an impact driver and give it a good few wallops. That'll do it. We need to wind in and release the handbrake shoes by winding the adjuster all the way up. This is what the shoe adjuster looks like with the disc off. That brings the shoes all the way in. Mind you, it doesn't always help, and sometimes the brake shoes hold on to the inside of the disc for grim life, so we'll need some persuasion with hammers and whatever else you can lay your hands on. But persevere, they will eventually give up and come off. So the handbrake shoes are not too bad. We're actually going to leave those. The actuator needs cleaning up a little bit, and the little shoe retainers, I've cleaned them up a little bit. We're going to insert them back in, and they go in through there, through the hole at the back. Press it and turn it 90 degrees. One. So we're rotating the disc round so we can locate the handbrake shoe adjusting knurled nut, which is in there. Remembering, in order to seat the disc properly, we wound that all the way in so the handbrake shoes were retracted all the way in. So now what we've got to do is we've got to wind it all the way back out so the handbrake shoes are tight, so we can't move this, and then we're going to wind it back 8 clicks. Wind it all the way back, and it shouldn't move because we've extended the handbrake shoes all the way into the side of the drum. So now just double check that it's not moving. Yep, we're going to back it off 8 clicks. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. We should be able to move it. Which we can. So that's the handbrake adjusted. The Allen key screw needs to be torqued to 16 Newton meters, which is hand tight and wrist tight. It only retains it to stop it moving. It doesn't hold the disc onto the hub because that's done by these. Put the little cover back in. So now we're going to refit the caliper carrier. I may have made a small schoolboy error. Well, it's more of an oversight really. When I took the caliper off, I thought I'd fully compressed the piston, but apparently I didn't. So we're going to have to compress it before we fit it, otherwise it won't fit over the new pads. I've inspected the seal and it's good. There's no split, there's no damage, and it's not weeping any brake fluid. The piston face has got a little bit of rust on it, which is completely normal. It's all the rubbish that the brakes chuck up, brake dust, combined with the salt on the roads and the water that we've got here. So we're going to clean that up as well as inside, because that's full of debris. And we'll just clean it up the best we can. While I'm cleaning that up, I'm contemplating whether to just replace the calipers and be done with it, not have to worry about the calipers for another 50,000-60,000 miles, or should we find that the piston is sticking, and that is another problem on top of our caliper pins that were sticking, or one of them, to rebuild it, or a combination of the two. Replace the calipers, rebuild these, and I can use these on the other Range Rover when I do those. Alternatively, this might just be absolutely fine, and we'll just compress the piston, put it back on. Now these one pot pistons on the L322 for this year are a single pot, and they're a pushing, there's no winding, they just compress them in. So first of all, let's clean it up a little bit, shall we? Gloves on. Brake cleaner is your friend. Well, it doesn't look great, so we'll carry on a little bit more and decide what we're going to do, as I'm still undecided. I'm going to compress it in and put it on, but whether we're going to then get some new calipers and take it all apart and put a new caliper on, I'm undecided. This is a pushing piston, so plate number 3 in this little kit. Don't forget to take off the cap from your brake fluid reservoir on the master cylinder, and with our little rewind tool, see if we can actually rewind it. And that's compressed in really easily. New bolts. .65 Newton meters, and for new bolts, another quarter turn. 35 Newton meters. Okay, let's just go over everything. Allen screw is in, cap is on. Caliper carrier torqued up. Caliper slider pins torqued, yep. Brake wear sensor in, yep. Pads are both in, yep. Nice arc on the brake line, no twists, no kinks. Okay, we're good. We're good to put the wheel back on. Give the wheels a good blasting off as well. New wheel nuts. Okay. Torque wrench. Torque them up to 140 Newton meters. And we're done. Well, we're done this side anyway. (140 Newton meters). Make sure you put the cap back on your reservoir. Okay, that's both sides done. Almost made it before the rain come. Almost. So we've now got to take it for a test drive, make sure our brakes are working. But before we do, we've obviously got to make sure we've got some brakes. So we're going to give the brake pedal 3 pumps. 1, gentle, not too hard. 2, and the 3rd all the way down. It's quite a good idea to make sure that you've got brakes before you go on a test drive to make sure your brakes are working. Once we've done that, we've just got one final thing to do, which is to bed in the electronic parking brake shoes, which is something that has to be done every time you change the discs on the rear. This little thing seems to be omitted by many professional YouTube mechanics. You obviously have to bed them in if you're changing your electronic parking brake shoes, but you also need to do it when you change your discs. There's a little procedure to do that, which I'll show you shortly after we've made sure our brakes are okay. No grinding or strange noises or anything untoward. And for now, I'm going to go and have a well-deserved cup of coffee and sit down with my feet up for 10 minutes and hope this rain passes. So it's test drive time now. We get up to about 30 miles an hour. See where we're going, shall we? And brake. And to a standstill. No clunking, no grinding, nothing's fell off. It's all a good sign. So we'll do that again. Up to 30 miles an hour or thereabouts. And brake. Oh, lovely. Run out of road, so we'll turn around a little bit. Don't want to go too far just yet. And we're actually going to do that 20 times. You heard that right, 20 times. So the brake pad manufacturers are telling us it takes about 200 miles of frequent light braking to properly bed in our new pads. 18. We're running out of road. And what we're doing by going 0 to 30 and light braking to a standstill is giving that process a little bit of a boost. It's still going to require further bedding in, but we've done some of the heavy lifting. And everything's as it should be. So that is the initial brake pad bedding in process done. 20 times, 0 to 30, light braking, bring it to a standstill. We've given that process a bit of a boost. We still need to avoid any hard braking for a couple of 100 miles. Hard braking is not a good thing for your new pads. The heat can cause a problem with the brake pad material integrity, which is a bad thing. So when we hand this car back, we shall remind the driver of the vehicle to try to avoid any heavy braking. Naturally, if you've got to do an emergency stop, you've got to do an emergency stop, but it's best to avoid hard braking. So that's the brake pads done, but now we've got to bed in electronic parking brake shoes into our new disc. To initiate the electronic parking brake shoes bedding in process, it's the same on all L322s as far as I know, although your displays will be different. And to do it, we're going to press down on the brake 3 times, and on the third one we're going to hold it 1, 2, 3. We're then going to pull up on the parking brake switch 4 times in succession, 1, 2, 3, 4. And then we're going to put it down 3 times in fast succession, 1, 2, 3. And there it is. Little display telling us park brake bedding cycle active. And what we need to do now is we need to drive and the speed between 19 and 22 miles an hour, very specific, and pull the parking brake on and keep it pulled up until we come to a stop. We then have to either wait a minute or drive about 500 meters to give the shoes time to cool down and do it again. And we do that 10 times. And each time we do that, the parking brake will feel that little bit firmer. If you go over 30 mile an hour, the system will end. So you need to be 19 to 22, pull it on, keep it below 30, 10 times. And then we've bedded in our electronic parking brake shoes into our new discs. So up to between 19 and 22 miles an hour, and we'll activate the parking brake and keep it activated till we're at a complete standstill. There we go. That's number one. Foot on the accelerator, only 9 to go. We're leaving it a minute or 500 meters between each activation. That's to give the electronic brake shoes time to cool down a little bit. Now let's do a little couple more 100 meters. Oncoming traffic, always an inconvenience. Okay, that's long enough and far enough to do the second activation. Number 2. Oh, that's a little bit better already. You can feel that's a little bit better. Only 8 more to go. Foot on the accelerator. 500 meters or 1 minute. Is that the aroma of brake shoes I can detect? Let's go for number 3. It was a little bit fast. Let's bring it down to 20. And activate. Definitely getting better. Small U-turn. And the last one. 10. It's good. Sniff test. Good. No heat. So I think we've actually solved the problem that we set out to solve. Good stuff. Now you may be watching this and going to yourself, I didn't know all that had to be done when I had my brakes and discs replaced. Or you might be watching it going, what on earth are you witching on about now? Every man and his dog knows that. I suspect they don't though, but there you go. But if you are asking yourself, I wonder if that place that I take my car to have my brakes and discs done does any of that. It's a good question, and you need to know the answer. Or it could be, for example, that they just chuck the brakes and discs on, pass you the keys back and tell you just take it easy for the next 100 miles or so. Does that sound familiar? They should have taken it out when they've done the brakes as an absolute minimum for a test drive, but really they should have bedded your brakes in and told you that they are still going to need bedding in for the next couple of 100 miles and how to do it. Because the beauty of doing your own brakes is you know that it's been done properly, and you know that you've done the bedding in procedure for your pads and for your electronic parking brake shoes. And there's no reason that you can't do your own brakes. So, just a bit of food for thought. Only you can find out the answers. You might not want to do your own brakes. You might be happy to take it to the local high street, nationally advertised quick service. But make sure you know what's going on with your braking system. It's quite an important thing. Anyway, as I say, food for thought. So, as we take this vehicle back to its owner and give her the good news that the braking system is all as it should be, I've made some decisions. As is normal when you start one job, you find yourself several others to do, and this job's been no exception. I was a bit surprised by the amount of corrosion and rust on the wishbone and generally underneath on the chassis when I got the wheel off. So I've already decided that I'm going to have to go back under there, treat the rust and corrosion, make it nice and Lanagard it, which I find quite enjoyable. And there's a few other things I've noticed. I should have really replaced the brake hoses. Although they're in good condition, I would be happier if I replaced the brake hoses. So I'm going to order those up and get back on with that. So the wheels will be coming off and I'll be doing the brake hoses. And I'm still undecided whether just to replace the calipers and the caliper carriers with new ones, which will give me the option of refurbishing these ones on a cold winter's night when I've got nothing else to do. Gets me out of the house. So I probably will do that. And there's a few other bits and bobs I've noticed while I had the wheels off that need doing. So that's something for future videos, and no doubt once I do those I'll find some other jobs that need doing. But it's all part of the fun of doing your own DIY on your own vehicles. Now, it's about this time on YouTube videos that the YouTuber, as I've recently found out we're called, learn something every day, will ask you to subscribe or comment or set an alarm thingy. I'm not going to do that. Partly because it annoys the crap out of me when I see that on every video, and partly because I don't care whether you subscribe or not. It makes no difference to me whatsoever. It's also a little bit insulting that for people to subscribe they have to be told to subscribe, which apparently works, but I don't want to do that either. So subscribe or don't, up to you. I mean, mostly these videos are for my own personal use, as when I'm 120 years old, and yes, I am planning on living till I'm 120 at least, I'll look back at these videos and go, look at that dick 60 years ago messing around with cars, the handsome fellow, and look how good he looks when he had all his hair and teeth. I've mostly got my hair anyway. But that's enough of that wittering on for now. I hope you found something of a little bit of interest in this, and I'll see you on the next one. Or I won't. Bye.